Hello, Bravs. We're back with the Golem Remembered, 1909 to 1980. Variations of a Jewish Legend by Arnold L. Goldsmith. We are finishing up on Chapter 5, Meyrink and the Psychological Gothic. Meyrink's final step in preparing Pernath for the mystical transformation of his character at the end of the novel is his unexpected arrest and imprisonment before he can kill himself. I do have the flashlight on. At the police station, he refuses to answer questions about Angelina and her lover. The superintendent of police claims he is an old friend of Pernath's father and urges him to cooperate with the investigation. When Pernath refuses, he is accused of having murdered the man whose damaged watch he had recently accepted as a gift from the junk dealer. Thus, Wassertrum succeeds in implicating him in the murder. A handcuffed and angry Pernath is put into a cell. Meyrink's love of satire is seen in the sign over the prison door. Law chastises the guilty and protects the innocent. Despairing in his cell, Pernath looks out at an old watchtower with a clock dial, the hands of which are missing. This ominous symbol suggests not the timelessness of the blissful state he has been seeking, but the fact that for him time has stopped. There is no such thing as protection of the innocent, as Pernath will discover as he rots in jail for months. The victim of a ruthless, indifferent, stupid bureaucracy. In fact, one of Pernath's 3 cellmates has been accused of murdering the same man the gem cutter is alleged to have killed. I mean, it's pretty good police work, honestly. You just arrest every suspect. After weeks of poor food, lack of water, and failing health, Pernath receives a long secret message from Cherasek with an escape plan. But the stubborn prisoner rejects it, insisting that an innocent man should not need such recourse. The messenger reveals to Pernath that Angelina is now divorced and has left with her child. With Pernath's new awareness of the depth of his love for Miriam, this part of his inner conflict is resolved, and Angelina is no longer needed to dramatize his split personality. She never reappears in the novel. The messenger also reveals that the junk dealer is dead, his throat slit by Pernath's former cellmate, who has escaped. Pernath himself had toyed in prison with the idea of using a file to kill the hated Wassertrum. His fantasy is fulfilled when his cellmate steals this very weapon and commits the murder for him. Meyrink again achieves his purpose of making the protagonist more attractive to the reader through the device of displacement. As Pernath peruses Cherasek's letter, he discovers how the junk dealer had framed him with the stolen watch because he had helped Angelina. Cherasek also explains his feeling of kinship with the gem cutter, a feeling which arose partly because of their mutual interest in the occult, a hint at which was a certain sign which he once recognized on Pernath's breast. Now a wealthy man, having been left everything in Aaron Wassertrum's will, Cherasek hints at his own suicide. He still wants to punish the junk dealer, even in the kingdom of the shadow. In his own will, Cherasek is leaving 1/3 of his new wealth to Pernath, explaining that years ago the junk dealer had ruined Pernath's family and stolen everything they owned. Pernath is stunned by Cherasek's generosity and thinks him a saint like Miriam and Hillel. To Pernath's list of saints and mentors, one last name has to be added: Amadeus Laponder. This new prisoner, with his pagod-like smile and smooth-skinned Buddha countenance, represents Meyrink's final use of character doubling to dramatize the inner conflict of his protagonist. Laponder, who has confessed to rape murder, his victim may have been Miriam, the reader cannot be certain, represents, like the Golem and Cherasek, the dark side of Pernath's psyche. Pernath's sexual interests are thus displaced on Laponder, who acts out the former's controlled impulses. Somehow the gem cutter, the medical student, and the murderer are all linked fraternally by their having had some contact with the other world. Both Cherasek and Laponder are familiar with the secret sign they recognize on Pernath's breast. But Leponder goes far beyond Chirosek in penetrating Pernath's innermost being. He is, for example, a medium through which Miriam and Hillel are able to contact Pernath. Miriam's voice is transmitted one night through the sleeping Leponder's lips and speaks of the couple's love for one another and the unspeakable happiness we had at last found. That could part us nevermore. When Pernath asks if she is dead, she says no, only asleep. But the reader must remember Hillel's earlier statement that sleep and death are one and the same thing. Leponder's dreams, which he describes vividly to Pernath, involve a visit to the sleeping Miriam, watched over by her loving father, and a trip underground to the room on the Alt Shagas, where he saw the Golem with his slanted eyes and queer clothes. Leponder even confirms that this strange creature was reading a book made of parchment, but the page began with an Aleph, the double man representing the oneness of both worlds, not an I. Pernath is amazed at his fellow prisoner's ability to duplicate his own experiences. Obviously, somehow or other, Leponder had managed during his sleep to penetrate my subconscious self and was now reproducing the result at random. But Leponder craves more information about Pernath's past experiences because they also concern him in some way and will supply him with an essential clue he lacks. Apparently, both Leponder and Pernath were approached by the same headless apparition, offering them red and black spotted seeds. Although Pernath struck them to the ground, Leponder accepted them, and thus was condemned to death. The seeds, explains Leponder, signify the powers of magic, and they will now remain in the custody of your forefathers until the time of their ripening. Then will the faculties still latent within you spring into being. Each man has within him the spiritual vestiges of thousands of his forebears. Thus Leponder had to commit the crime he did. As hideous as it was, something inside of me, of which I had no previous knowledge, came to life and was stronger than I was. It was but the working out of some dormant principle, long hidden within my being, over which I possessed no power. Only with his execution for the crime will he be set free. Through Leponder's death, the destructive side of Pernath will be overcome symbolically and the spiritual liberated. Pernath considers his new mentor another saint, despite the horror of his crime. Leponder explains that the hypnotism which removed Pernath's memory of his childhood is really a holy stigmata, the sign of all those bitten by the snake of the kingdom of the spirit. It almost looks as if two lives must be found together in us, like the mistletoe and the oak, before the miracle of awakening can take place. Awakening. What is usually accomplished by death, the separation of the two selves, has resulted here from extinction of the memory, or sometimes by a sudden internal reversal and upheaval. Such an upheaval, a complete change of personality, occurred in Leponder when he turned 21. At that time, his dreams became reality to him and vice versa. Every man, if taught, could enter this state. And the key consists in simply and solely this, that a man during sleep, the state of Meyrink's narrator, shall become conscious of his ego form, his skin, so to say, and aware of that infinitesimal rift through which his conscious self presses in that transition state which lies betwixt waking and deep sleep. Our struggle to attain immortality is our struggle to gain ascendancy over those unruly ghosts and warring elements innate within our being. We await botching this. We await the crowning of the true I, which is the same as the Messiah. Here's the key to Meyrink's novel. The Golem ultimately symbolizes all those unruly ghosts and warring elements deep within each man. They must be overcome, tamed, in the individual's quest for immortality. To attain that perfect state which is the redemption of the soul, that discovery of the ideal self made real. This is the true mystical, some would say religious, experience. When Pernath reaches that state, he will no longer be bound by his own senses and reason. He will have entered a new mystical dimension, symbolized by the crowning of his doppelganger, whom Pernath now calls Habal Garman, giving him the name of a Kabbalistic figure who, according to Shamaja Hillel, represents almost absolute purity and incorruptibility. With a vivid analogy, Laponder tries to clarify his philosophy. Human beings are like tubes made of glass through which many colored balls may roll. Most men are restricted to one color only. Should the ball be red, the man is branded as bad. If yellow, then he is good. Should two balls pursue their passage through the same tube, one yellow and one red, then that man has an unstable character. But we who have been bitten by the serpent compress within ourselves the experience of a whole race within an age. Colored balls rush wildly on their way through the glass tube, and when it ends, then are we prophets and the mirror of very God himself. In terms of Laponder's analogy, he himself has reached that stage of stability and inner vision where he has now become a prophet. To use Pernath's earlier phrase, Laponder's soul has been perfectly burnished and thus can serve as a mirror of the highest ideality, God himself. As for Pernath, he has been passing through the stage of being an unstable character, but the end is in sight when he too will pass into a new dimension where the ideal becomes the real. Pernath is overwhelmed by Laponder's insights and considers himself far inferior to the murderer rapist, but Laponder disagrees and says that he is infinitely below the gem cutter. Pernath has supplied him with the key he lacked, a reference to the hermaphrodite. As the jailer comes to execute him, Laponder insists that he is a happy man. This is my bridal day, and with it, my crime is closely knit. Upon the release from prison months later, Pernath is a wealthy man, heir to 1/3 of Cherosek's estate because the student took his own life over Aaron Wassertrum's grave in pursuit of his father's evil spirit. In a sense, Cherosek carries out the death wish so strong in Pernath. When the latter tries to take a cab to the Hanspesgasse, he is told that it is impossible since the Jewish quarter is being rebuilt. The drosky lets him off before a heap of ruins. His old house is but a skeleton. The only name the workmen recognize is that of the mute who cuts out silhouettes in the Café Chaos. When he visits this cafe, Pernath is stunned by his own image in the mirror. He sees a remarkable change, an entirely unfamiliar face, wrinkled, pasty, gray as putty, with scrubby beard and long, tangled hair. Pumping the bewildered mute for information about his friends, Pernath learns that Zwak, Frieslander, and Prokop are on tour with the marionettes. Hillel has gone, but no one knows where. Miriam is gone also. And when Pernath asks where, the mute pantomimes sleep. At the Jewish council house, Pernath is told that Hillel has left, presumably with his daughter. The mystery of Miriam's possible murder is left unanswered. Pernath next rents rooms in the Altschagasse, the only street in the ghetto not being torn down. By some curious law of coincidence, it turned out to be precisely the same house as that in which the Golem was said to have taken refuge, according to the old legend. Pernath's earlier experience in the Golem's room has been wiped from his mind like a vanished dream. On Christmas Eve, Pernath brings a little tree and red candles to his room. Longing to be a boy again, he plans to start searching for Hillel and Miriam at the beginning of the new year, but for now he has a feeling of happy contentment, the sweet peace of a man who, after many wanderings, returns to his home and sees from afar the spires of his native town. Meyrink's imagery of the traveler returning home hints at Pernath's imminent discovery of the details of his boyhood and youth. This implication is reinforced when the gem cutter discovers a street peddler selling the heart-shaped stones strung on a piece of silk that Angelina gave him as a child in her castle garden when they parted years ago. In a flash, says Pernath, my youth stood revealed to me, in miniature, as though I gazed at it through a peep show on a small scale. However, Meyrink supplies no further details and ignores the reader's expectation of further revelations, presumably because he is more concerned with the nature of the mystical experience than with rational Freudian explanations. Alone in his attic room, Pernath sits almost in a trance as the candle burns down. Suddenly, he sees his doppelganger again, and as Laponder had foretold, there is a crown upon his head. The moment of redemption has arrived with the crowning of Habal Garmin, but at this ecstatic moment, Pernath discovers that the house is on fire. He climbs the roof to safety and uses a chimney sweep's rope to let himself down as he was once taught in school. Passing a window, he looks in and sees Hillel and Miriam. When he drops the rope, he is, like the hanged man on the tarot card, momentarily suspended betwixt heaven and earth, before he falls, unable to grasp the smooth window sill, which is smooth like a lump of fat. This odd simile is repeated from a Buddhist parable told in the opening chapter, according to which a crow, thinking he had passed over a delicious lump of fat, flew down for a close inspection, only to realize that he had been deceived. The parable was meant as a warning to Gautama's followers not to be duped by the false pleasures of this world. The full meaning of this lesson cannot be understood until the final chapter, with its revelation of a paradisical world beyond this one. Or is it paradisical? Meyrink implies that Pernath must not be deceived into expecting his love for Miriam to be consummated on earth. In the final chapter, the narrator wakes up in a hotel and wonders if all that has happened to him has been a dream. His name is not Athanasius Pernath. That is the name of the owner of the hat he took by mistake at the cathedral. When he tells the porter he wants to go at once to the old Jewish quarter, he is informed that it is impossible, since it has all been rebuilt long ago. Obviously, the narrator realizes I had experienced within my dream everything that Athanasius Pernath had lived through. Everything have I witnessed, heard, and felt within the space of one night, as though I had been he. Searching for Pernath to exchange hats, the narrator is directed to Lozitschek's. Figuring that Pernath must be 90 now, the narrator looks for someone who might remember him. He asks a waitress when the stone bridge had broken down and is informed that it had happened in a winter storm 33 years ago. The same evening, the Golem and other apparitions had appeared to him, offering the red seeds. A footnote from the editor at this point explains this mistake in Meyrink's chronology, since Pernath was supposed to be in his 40s when the bridge was damaged in 1890. Pernath eventually finds two old men, one of whom, the blind Shafranik, sings the same song he sang in Pernath's time. When the narrator speaks into the old man's ear and asks if he remembers Pernath, the senile Shafranek asks jokingly if he means perilous. When the narrator shouts, "No, not perilous, Pernath," the old man comes back with, "Paschelles?" Disappointed, the narrator gives up. How many of Meyrink's readers got this little joke in 1915 is unknowable, but the readers of this study will surely recognize Pericles as the author of Megalath Yukashin, the first family chronicle of Rabbi Judah Loew. I recall Paschales, of course, was the editor of Sippurim, the collection of tales of Prague within the first printed tale of Rabbi Loew's Golem. The other man in the tavern remembers Pernath well. If I'm not mistaken, he says, they used to say that he was mad. Pernath once said, yes, I believe he once said his name was, let me think, Laponder. And at other times he'd give himself out for a certain Cherasek. By explicitly identifying the three men with each other in this way, Meyrink clarifies for the last time the function of Laponder and Cherasek as Pernath's doubles. The old man adds one last bit of information. He thinks that later in life Pernath married a very beautiful Jewish. The squint-eyed boatman who has been listening to this conversation and denies that Pernath ever existed offers to show the narrator the last lamp house on his trip down the Moldau. Early in the morning, the narrator excitedly recognizes the house on the Olshaskas with the iron bars and slippery stone, but in answer to his query, he is told with authority that this house never was on fire. While he is being rowed on the Moldau, the narrator experiences a kind of deja vu. My soul seems possessed with a strange feeling of solemnity. A faint, indefinable feeling rises within me, as of something proceeding from another life than this, some previous enchanted existence. The whole world, in fact, seems enchanted, seen through a haze of dreamy recognition, as though I had lived already at many times, and in many places, simultaneously. Through this haze of dreamy recognition, Meyrink has created an intricate pattern of doubles, reflections in a row of mirrors. The narrator, the Golem, Cherisek, and Laponder, all providing glimpses into the mystical transformation of the soul of Athanasius Pernath. As the narrator proceeds down the street of the alchemist, he feels familiar with every inch. However, instead of a glimmering white house barring his way, a magnificent gold one stands there now. On the garden wall is a mosaic of frescoes depicting the Egyptian cult of the god Osiris. On the swinging door is seen once again the god himself, a hermaphrodite in two halves, the right female, the left male. The figure seated on the throne has a golden head shaped like a hare. The ears stand up like two pages of an open book. When the very old gardener, wearing ruffles on his neck, silver buckles on his shoes, and a curious coat, asks through the bars what the narrator wants, the latter silently hands him the hat of Athanasius Pernath. As the doors of the marble house open, the narrator sees Athanasius Pernath and a young-looking Miriam standing as in a temple. So like is he to myself, the narrator observes. It is as though beholding my own face and figure in the glass. The old servant, obviously the now redeemed Golem, hands the narrator his correct hat, delivering a message as though proceeding from the bowels of the earth. The message from Herr Athanasius Pernath is a thank you for the return of the hat, an apology for not being able to invite him in because of the ancient rules of the house. He also explains that his master has never worn the narrator's hat, having immediately discovered the mistake. The last line of the message and novel is Meyrink's final joke on the reader. He only hopes his hat may not have given you a headache. What a great joke. All right, Bravs, that's all. Goodbye. Good boy.